Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello, I'm Hannah Quinn Mulligan. Welcome to this week's podcast. Coming up on the show,
creating opportunities for diversification as well. All those will create job opportunities, and employment is absolutely key to keeping young people in their communities.
Macra President James Healy outlines the strategic plan for the organisation with a focus on keeping young people in rural communities.
Whatever we get back from the marketplace, we will pay it back out to our farmers and reward them as best we can. But the first half of 2018 looked sticky enough.
And will dairy farmers need to tighten their belts in 2018? We hear from Lakeland CEO Michael Hanley. But first, the Irish Farmers Journal recently reported that grain growers only received 5 cents for every €5 pint of Guinness sold. Our correspondent Amy Ford spoke to Bobby Miller of the Irish Grain Growers Association, who staged a protest outside Guinness in Dublin this week.
Bobby, we're outside the Guinness storehouse here again today for a second time in a short number of weeks. Last time you handed in a letter to Guinness's, what has been the response from that? And you're obviously back here again today. What's been going on since then?
We had no response from the likes of Bournemouth, or there's no progress being made at all since we were here last, Amy. The reality is things haven't changed. We're still looking for €200, a minimum of €200 a tonne, a simplified set-in scheme. We're looking for specifications to be loosened a little bit as well. We got a response from Diageo, which the response means that they don't understand the situation at present. We've been ignored totally by who we supply to, which is Peter Nallen and Bournemouth. That's not an accepted situation. We represent 40 to 50% of the barley that is delivered into Guinness and Diageo. Guinness and Diageo make 3.6 billion last year alone. Tillage farmers only made 30,000. You go and ask any of these farmers here today what's their opinion on malt and barley at present. It says we're not sowing it anymore, we're reducing the acreage. The traditional malt and barley acres is disappearing. Sowing winter crops, there's more money in sowing winter barley, winter wheat, oats. There's just more money in it, and we're just here today to get the point across to Diageo that your malt and barley, your Irish malt and barley that you pride, is disappearing off the land of Ireland, and they may step up to the plate.
You met with someone from Diageo, but it's not someone that you want to meet with, someone in procurement, on the procurement side of things. Will you be back here again? That's
up to Diageo to give us a proper response to the situation. We have told them when we'll be back, but we won't reveal that just yet. We're here on a nice quiet day today. That's the only clue we'll give you. The next time it might be so quiet.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Macra, the organisation representing young farmers and young people from the rural community, launched their strategic plan this week in Leinster House. I asked their president, James Healy, what the plan meant for the future of the organisation and young farmers.
We're here today in Leinster House to launch the strategic plan that Macra has completed only recently, which will run from 2017 to 2023, and which outlines the mission, the vision, the values of Macra, the strategic goals, and how we're going to go about achieving those goals so that our members have the organisation that they want and that they need into the future.
And you mentioned as well the rural base that you have in the organisation. I think you said 95% membership is from rural base. So how important is it to maintain that rural base? I mean, how are you going to keep young people in the community when they seem to be leaving a lot of the time?
That rural base is absolutely vital to our organisation. And as I said, while we have clubs in urban areas, most of those people that are in those clubs are people with a connection to their rural community. They've only just moved away. So keeping young people in their communities is absolutely vital, and that's why we see agriculture and job opportunities in agriculture, agri-food, but creating opportunities for diversification as well. All those will create job opportunities, and employment is absolutely key to keeping young people in their communities, because what we see is they have to go to urban areas for college, and then they have their first job, and then there's no reason for them to go home. So what's absolutely vital is that the opportunity for them to go home is there, because if they have the opportunity, they will go home. So it's about fighting for things like rural broadband. It's infrastructure that allows those employment opportunities to arise in local communities. That's what's going to keep young people in their local communities.
You mentioned employment. Obviously it's linked to money, and last night you and I were both at an agri-seminar in Tullamore run by the Offaly Macra in conjunction with AIB, talking about opportunities for young farmers in particular. Dairy, we know, has had a particularly good year. suckler and sheep farming now. There are two other situations completely. So what about for young people who want to be farmers? Do you think the opportunities are there? Do you think the market's there for them?
There certainly, and obviously, as you said, the dairy market certainly needs the people, needs young people. There's, as Paddy Kelly said, there's 6,000 young people needed for dairy farming. But I think when we look at the other sectors, there are opportunities there. It's about identifying them, and we recently completed a tour around the country. We ran 5 young farmer meetings with our members, and the focus was on the different sectors, because we wanted our young farmers that are in beef and sheep and tillage to tell us what they need, where they see their sector going, where they see the opportunities, so that we can then take that message on further. And we had the Minister here today.
Does that involve ensuring that there's going to be a national reserve next year? Because there have been rumours that there might not be.
We'll be fighting as hard as we possibly can, and obviously this year again another new source of funding for that national reserve needs to be found. So we're going back and forth with the department to ensure that some national reserve, obviously the national reserve that was there last year has been almost completely wiped out, and that shows that the appetite that there is there for young farmers. But obviously a new source of funding is going to have to be found this year, and we're fighting extremely hard on that.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
The Foodwise 2017 conference took place this week under the heading Stepping Up to Sustainable Growth. Our correspondent Lorcan Allen asked the chair of the event, John Maloney, what key points he'd taken away from the conference.
I think that there's a recommitment to the targets around Foodwise, that we grow the industry. I think it's positive. We're not growing, we're going to be going backwards. However, I think that has to be done against the context of a changing CAP, and that we have and continue to make real progress in terms of our environmental sustainability. I think that's going to bring challenges, but I think it is about equipping people with the skills, tools and the knowledge to make change along the supply chain, from farm through processing right through the product getting delivered, to ensure that we can reduce carbon. And really what that means is farming and operating as efficiently as possible. It's about productivity, it seems to me, that we produce a given amount for a lower level of input. So at farm level it's about really being excellent at grassland, it seems to me, and starting with the soil to sward, where we can and where the technologies exist, and where new technologies are emerging, getting those effectively transmitted to farmers in a way they can adopt and adapt to them.
And John, as a former managing director of Glanbia, what does this kind of the Foodwise strategy, government engaging with the industry and farm level, what does that mean for food companies?
I think it's crucial. It's as much about a process as a plan. I think there are many sectors that are envious of the food sector having a forum where it comes together with government, with the arms of government, in this case Enterprise Ireland, Board BIA and so on, and talks about the issues and tries to come up with actions that are taken over time to address the issues, to enable the industry to go forward, sustain jobs, sustain successful farming and enable it to adapt to changing circumstances. And it is crucial that we continue it.
That was John Maloney there. Still to come, we have the CEO of Lakeland Dairy on the future milk price and how homelessness is affecting rural areas.
Fears over new land eligibility penalties. For more in this week's Farmers Journal, here's Paul Mooney.
Creed rules out fodder relief scheme. Brexit, why no deal is a good deal for farmers. More red tape, stricter slurry rules, and now Europe to tell farmers how to plough their fields. We reveal our top crew cabs for farmers and why farmers should be wary of the growing influence of vegans.
Plus, don't miss your free Christmas food magazine inside this week's Irish Farmers Journal, on sale today.
Now, 2017 has been a particularly good year for dairy farmers, with overall Irish milk output this year expected to reach 7 billion litres, and the farm gate prices encouraging many other farmers to take the plunge into dairy. But at the annual Offaly Macra na Firma Agri Seminar, the CEO of Lakeland Dairies, Michael Hanley, sounded a note of caution for the future milk price. I spoke to Michael at the event and started by asking him if he was confident that Irish co-ops could handle the increased milk output.
Milk is up in Lakeland Dairies. It has grown significantly over the last 3 to 4 years in particular. We're predicting, our farmers are predicting an extra 200 million, approximately 20% growth in our milk production, 20 to 25% growth in our milk production over the next 5 years. I'm quite confident in relation to dairy markets. There is a growing world population. There's a growing consumption of dairy year on year. A lot of places have reached their peak in relation to milk availability and sustainability in relation to phosphate levels and directive, etc., in the likes of Holland and the Netherlands. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for Irish dairy going forward. It's a good time to be a dairy farmer. I think the next 5 to 10 years would be quite positive from dairy, and albeit the next 6 months could be sticky enough with the volume of product as an intervention. But if we look out over the medium to longer term, over the next 5, 10, 15 years, I think dairy production and dairy producers will get a reasonable return from their dairy enterprises.
You mentioned a lot of things there. We'll go first to the export markets that you were talking about. I mean, we know that there's an increasing world population. We know that there's an increase in demand. But you were talking about the exports of powder. I mean, are we going to have the value there? So say compared to butter, obviously has a high value attached to it. Powder, not so much. And for every 1 tonne of butter, we have 2 tonnes of skim milk powder, which we know is being held in intervention as well by the EU. So are we going to have the value there to sustain the Irish market? Or are these just going to be cheap exports?
No, I think the value is going to be there. I think we're getting a wee bit carried away with ourselves in relation to the butter performance. Butter performance has been good for 6 or 7 months in 2017. Historically, proteins and the powders were always ahead of the butter side of the equation. So hopefully butter can maintain a premium over where it has been, and that it's now a healthy product, and it's in a lot of diets and in a lot of recipes, and that it's at a more sustainable, higher level price going forward. So hopefully that price is sustained, as I say, at a higher level. So, but if you take the mix of the powders, as you said, there's 2 tonne of skim for every tonne of butter. So you have to get a market. You have to get a market for all of those products, and we are seeing also in the growth of our, apart from the powder business, and we've invested significantly in the powder business. We're also seeing growth in the UHT range of emulsion products that we're manufacturing, dairy emulsion, UHT, long life products that we're manufacturing for markets.
And the value is there, you think?
The value is there, and I think also there's a ceiling on production. Over the last number of years, there was always going to be a car crash in milk production and dairy markets after 2015, after the 1st of April 2015, particularly as Europe ramped up. New Zealand was already ramping up at a pace, plus the Americans, so it was a perfect car crash at that stage in relation to dairy prices. But now you're seeing more sustainable levels of production, I think, in America, New Zealand, and I think even Europe. So I think people have been chastened to some extent by the poor dairy prices of 15 and 16. So to me, it bodes well, apart from the fact that there's 400,000 tonne of skim and intervention, which is 2.5 years of age, which is, is it fit for human consumption at this stage is a question mark over that particular product, but still is causing a lot of ripples in the marketplace, and that will happen for the next 5 to 6 months.
Well then, a future dairy price, Teagasc today said the outlook is maybe a 10% decrease in price. What do you think? You mentioned a rocky 6 months perhaps ahead for the dairy industry here.
Yeah, look, the next 6 months are sticky because butter prices has been a pushback on the high butter prices that were there for just 3 or 4 months of 2017. Let's not forget that this is not a phenomenon that has been there for the last year and a half. Butter prices were up at €7,000 a tonne for 4 or 5 weeks out of 2017, and skim is under intervention. So really what we need is for the mountain of skim that's in intervention stores to be moved out into calf makeup placers, take a hit on it, move forward, and let's get to March or April with a much reduced volume of product hopefully maybe an empty shed of skim milk powder, that the sheds would be empty in the springtime.
Can you put a cent per litre mark on the price of milk in the future? Roughly, a rough guide, what would you expect to see in the next 6 months?
No, look at that. At this stage I wouldn't like to put a price on it, but I think 2017 will go down as quite a good year. 2018 won't be as good no matter how you look at it with butter prices.
Is the Teagasc 10% decrease, is that fair, do you think?
Well, Teagasc have analysts that have, and they have a backup for that.
You have analysts too, I'd say.
Look at what we will get, Hannah, for definite, and our farmers know this. Whatever we get back from the marketplace, we will pay it back out to our farmers and reward them as best we can. But the first half of 2018 looks sticky enough in relation to the butter price on the way in, and skim milk powder prices currently today €300 or 3 cent litre under intervention.
So last question, are you hoping that there won't be any more intervention then put into stock? Is this the last intervention that you want to see?
Look, at intervention has been of value in years when there has been surplus of supply. It has taken product off the market. It's just, I suppose, the volumes that are there currently is worrying. We were here this time last year and there was 370,000 tonnes in intervention. We're here 12 months later and there's a bigger volume in intervention. That's of concern. Normally, the tool of intervention is there to take some surplus product off for a short period of time and then, to stop the market from falling too much, and then to correct overheating markets to feed that back into the market. But the current phenomenon that we're having with intervention it's not operating in that fashion. The volume of product is there. There was a wall of milk after 2015 post quotas. So I think we're in unique circumstances. Look, let's move forward from this. And I think, as I said previously, I think dairy incomes and dairy prices, when we get out to the first half of 2018, I think will be more sustainable.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Now, as we eagerly await to hear the details of a potential renewable heat initiative that could involve the farm community, our correspondent Thomas Hubert went to the Energy Now conference, where he spoke to farmer Tommy O'Shea about why he had made the switch to solar.
Yeah, well, the farm is a family business. There's a lot of us involved in it. We've been farming in Piltown for about 5 generations, and I suppose what we specialise in carrots and potatoes at the moment, and part of that is we have a big requirement for refrigeration, so we're a fairly high user of electricity, and over the years we've been trying different projects to reduce our consumption of electricity, whether it be lighting, whether it be improving our refrigeration, getting in lower kilowatt units and so on. And then we completed several projects in that area, and we started to look at how we could produce our own electricity, and we ended up, for a couple of different reasons, we ended up going down the road of solar. And in October 2015 we installed a 250 kilowatt solar system, solar photovoltaic array, and at the time it was the largest in Ireland. So that's where we got to it. Yeah.
So how much did you invest in that project, and how long would it take to pay back, more or less?
Right, so our investment was approximately €250,000, and during the original feasibility study, it was expected we'd maybe have a payback in 8 years. But to be honest, in the intervening time, the unit price of electricity has been relatively low. So at the moment, if the unit price of electricity was to stay the same, it would probably take 10 years to repay. But I suppose what we don't know is where electricity prices are going. And obviously, if the price of electricity was to increase, that will obviously maybe bring the payback period back to the original 7, 8, 9 years. Yeah.
And you're mentioning the price of electricity because what you're doing is displacing buying electricity, reducing your bills. You're not selling electricity, it's for your own use.
No, this is for our own consumption. And I suppose because at the moment you can't get, if we exported electricity to the grid, we wouldn't get paid for it, basically. So we very much had to design the system to be at our minimum daily usage of electricity. So the system is designed to be maybe somewhere between 10 and 12% of our total electricity usage for the year.
Would there be an interest for you if there was a tariff and if there was an opportunity to sell to the grid?
Certainly, I mean, for example, we have a plant room for the inverters. We had to get our grid connection to the ASB. We had to put in the various infrastructure in relation to protection, safety features, G10 protection and so on. And so for us to extend our system would be, I think it would be a lot easier to add to our system now than it was maybe installed at day one. But the big issue is that we can't install it if we're going to be leaking electricity into the grid that we're not getting paid for, basically. Yeah.
Okay. So very easy for you to upgrade and upscale if there was the opportunity commercially there.
Exactly, yes, yeah.
Thank you, Tommy O'Shea, very much. Thanks.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
A few weeks ago, the Irish Farmers Journal reported that average factory carcass weights were getting lighter. It's an issue that's been attributed to the increasing national dairy herd and the rise in dairy cross beef calves coming onto the market. Paul Nolan of Dawn Meats was at the same Macra na Firma conference as Michael Hanley in Tullamore and spoke to me about the factory's capacity to handle increased numbers and the issue of dairy beef.
If the markets are out there, we can certainly handle them. It's been a factor now for nearly 3 weeks in Ireland. It's probably at the peak, obviously, right now. And I suppose the fact that prices have actually hardened is proof that we're handling them at the moment, yes.
Do you think it will continue to increase in the future?
Well, the projections for next year are that the kill number will increase slightly again. But the pattern, I'm not quite so sure. This year, I suppose there was a combination of a wet late summer, which meant that a lot of cattle went in and were finished maybe somewhat earlier than usual. So whether or not we'll hit a consistent run of 40,000s next year, I'm not sure at this stage. It
was an issue you highlighted, an issue lots of people talked about, dairy beef and an increase in it because, of course, the dairy herd nationally is increasing. I mean, you had a slide and it showed that carcass weights across the board have gone down. Is that an issue for the beef industry?
No, it's not an issue. But I think the issue really is going to be more in terms of the quality of the carcass that's going to come from the dairy herd. As far as the dairyman is concerned, obviously, his a simple objective: minimum gestation and early maturing bull to be able to get a young calf, a small calf, an easy calfer at the first point. From our perspective, we think those two things can be, obviously, and are being done, but there's an easy add-on. If the right bull is used, you can also get the proper carcass conformation grades out of the bull that's used as a cross. But I suppose until such time as the guy who's buying that calf gets to realise the differences, it's not going to encourage the dairy guy to do that just yet.
I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's over 1 million dairy calves born every year, and about 500,000 of those are sire unknown.
Yes.
And a lot of those would be attributed to beef bulls, say. So when you talk about the right kind of sire, are you talking about going for a Charolais rather than a Hereford and Angus, or do you think it's more terminal leaning bulls?
Yeah, more terminal leaning bulls. I think we can't restrict what people decide to use, and at the moment, obviously Angus is by far the majority, but it's a classic example where, yes, it ticks the box, early gestation, it ticks the box about being an early calver, but there is within the Angus breed strong paternal sires as well, and that's something that I think we haven't just latched onto yet, but we need to.
So is that an issue then for if we keep marking sire unknown down, if dairy farmers do? And it might be a perfectly honest thing, maybe they have 2 or 3 bulls running and they don't know who the sire is, but if we don't identify the terminal sires, that's going to be an ongoing issue.
It is, and the market will actually tweak that in time, because if you take a case where a man is going to a mart or whatever and buying calves, and he's paying the same price for them all, they're black, for example, and he has an idea that he's going to get an Angus bonus on them. If they don't make the grade when they come in, he's lost serious money on those, so he's effectively paid the bonus to the dairyman. So I think after being hurt maybe a number of times or disappointed a number of times in that way, there will be a deeper focus in terms of getting that sorted out. But at the moment it is a problem. Yes, I appreciate guys are buying a little bit in the dark.
So last question, I've heard some talk about the need maybe for a minimum carcass weight to be applied. You don't think that'll happen?
No, I don't, because as I said there tonight, processors process, and I'm of the firm view that whatever size or shape of carcass comes in
the factory can handle them. It's a question of what level of market you want to aspire for your product.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
And finally, we repeatedly hear that the country is in the grips of a homelessness crisis. However, usually the problem is highlighted as only being an issue in Dublin. But this week, the Irish Country Living team have pointed out the issue of homelessness in rural areas. Anne O'Donoghue from the Irish Country Living team spoke to our correspondent Thomas Hubert about the issue.
There are over 5,000 adults homeless in the country, and most of them are in Dublin. But out of that 5,000, there are still 1,700 that live outside of Dublin. So the point that I'd be making is just because there's a huge problem somewhere doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking at a problem that is everywhere else. In isolation, the rest of the country still has quite large numbers of homelessness, but you just don't hear about it because obviously it's overshadowed by that massive, huge cohort that is Dublin.
And maybe in rural areas there would be a bit more help in the family and all that bigger houses, and there are a lot of people who are homeless but not registered.
Yeah, that's very true. The figures that we have here, we have this week in Irish Country Living, we have a county by county breakdown. They are just the official homelessness figures, those who are registered with their local authority and accessing services. Obviously those numbers don't cover anybody who are couch surfing, staying with friends. We talked to a number of different charities while doing this article, and they said that they would know of countless people who are staying with 6 different people, 6 different nights of the week, and winging it the 7th night. So these are just kind of really the tip of the iceberg, I'd say.
Okay, so what kind of areas did you visit? Where is this problem really prevalent in rural Ireland?
Obviously in areas where there are urban centres, Limerick, Galway, Waterford, Cork, it's quite big, but it is in, think of the smaller counties, it is as well. We visited Longford, me and my colleague Tracy Donaghy. We went to a homeless hostel there, St Martha's, and there was 11 beds for men. So that's just in one place alone, there's 11 homeless people. And what we took there is that there's amazing work going on in these places, Thomas. All of these people, there's people working with them, and first thing they're trying to do is they're trying to access services so that they can achieve independent living. So we all know that the main cause of homelessness tend to be addiction, whether it's drug or alcohol, financial stress, family breakdown. So they're trying to overcome any problems they may have there. But the big problem now that was highlighted to us is even when they overcome those struggles that they're having, there's still the huge roadblock of rising rents and lessening availability of accommodation. So that kind of tends to be the biggest issue for them then. So even if you've overcome any problems that you have, still there's rent in the DAF.ie report for the third quarter of this year in comparison to the third quarter of 2016. Rents rose in every county in Ireland. In Donegal and Sligo, the smallest increase was seen, that was 5.5%. In a county like Longford, in that period, in 12 months, the rent rose by 9%. And then there's very little accommodation. So it is quite,
and that's it from
quite
this week.
A
Thanks for listening. Don't forget
okay,
you can stay
and thank you very much.
All
you
the
have
news
a detailed story in this week's Irish Country
Twitter,
Living about
Facebook,
it. Thank you.
Snapchat, thank you. And our app. I'm Hannah Quinn Mulligan, and the sound engineer was Ferdia Mooney.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.